Here, you're ready for your dose of reality. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Dr. Quack Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Quack.
And I'm the important one, Mr. Mayhem. That's right. The last show we talked about the special prop that was just for this show, Chi-Town Rumble 1989. This was a great match, and the whole show was a great show. We're going to hear to talk about it.
Oh, yeah. We're talking about one of the best shows, the Chi-Town Rumble 1989 here. Had a lot of great matches here. This was around a time when the NWA was trying to expand, from the Mid-Atlantic, and it wanted to go out, and its first place was in Chicago.
That's right. Now, the NWA actually was a national brand. There was NWA San Francisco and Los Angeles and all these other things. But Jim Crockett was trying to regionalize and nationalize to compete with Vince McMahon. So he took it out of the Mid-Atlantic, which is the Carolinas and
Georgia,
part of Tennessee and Georgia, and tried to compete on a national level and went to Chicago for the Chi-Town Rumble. This was a really, really successful show. Jim Crockett, however, screwed up, and one we're not going to talk about, when he went to Madison Square Garden and got 2,300 people in Madison Square Garden. So while this one was a great one, Jim Crockett overestimated because of how good this show really was.
Yeah, and this took place, like I said, in Chicago, Illinois. The UIC Pavilion had 8,000 in attendance. This was a smaller circuit here. But on commentary, you had Jim Ross and Magnum TA.
This is pre-good old JR. Jim Ross wasn't wearing the cowboy hat. He had his faster tone and faster inflection in his voice. Magnum TA was a wrestler. For those of you who are not familiar, he was injured in 1986 in a very, very bad car accident. He wrapped his Porsche around a telephone pole. You could tell he still wasn't 100% steady. He stood one way and he didn't move because he was still standing and holding his cane. He had his good and bad points as far as a commentary team. When it talked about the moves in the ring, he did a good job. If he was asked anything else, Jim Ross learned quick not to ask.
Pretty much. Yeah, it was like Strangers in Paradise there. It did not work. In referees, you had Teddy Long and Tommy Young. And the third referee from the first match, we don't know.
Yeah, that IMDb doesn't list him. He's a very, very older black gentleman. A good referee, but it's obvious he came from the 60s, 70s style of refereeing. Whoever you were, thank you for being there for the show.
Definitely. Big on interviewer here, we have Bob Caudle.
Bob Caudle was a decent ring backstage interviewer guy. When we started doing the podcast together as this version, when he was doing commentary with
Starcade.
Gordon Soley and Starcade 83 and 84, he was okay. He was a much better guy backstage. Yes. He could let everything flow. He was really good at improvising with the interviewing time and letting the people tell their story. So he did a really good job here.
And ring announcer, we had the great Gary Michael Capetta.
Yes, Gary Michael Capetta, in all honesty, should not be a great ring announcer, but he actually is. He's got a kind of nasally voice. He can't talk like this. But he puts a lot of emotion in it, and the crowd responds like they're supposed to. So he is a very good ring announcer, in spite of some of the things that should have held him back.
Yeah, now let's move on to the beginning of the show here. We had Michael Hayes against the Russian Assassin number 2 with Paul Jones.
Assassin number 1 on this one.
Number 1?
Some places listed as number 2, some places listed as number 1. The Russian Assassin number 1 was the Angel of Death, Dave Sheldon, who was known for his time in World Class. He was the bodyguard for a while for the Freebirds. He never really did a lot. He was kind of the afterthought. He was the first Black Scorpion. Not really well known by his name or by his gimmick. He was not a great worker. He was decent and passable, really good journeyman. But Michael Hayes also not very good in the ring. This match was okay. Michael Hayes was a much better talker than he was a worker. And he and the Angel of Death, Russian Assassin number 1, let's get it right. They didn't have a lot of chemistry. This match was okay. 2.25 stars. It was, we got introduced to the 14-foot ring, folks.
Yes. For those of you who don't know, the WWE uses a 20 by 20 foot ring. Independent shows generally have used a 16 or an 18-foot ring. There is a difference there when you're trying to run from one side to the other or take an arm drag. In this case, a 14-foot ring. From the center, if you take an arm drag, you're well into the ropes.
Yeah, and to put it in a little more understanding, because the way the cameraing was done in the 80s, they were really up close to hide the fact that it was a small ring. Boxing rings are 22 feet.
Yes.
So when you think about that space when they're moving around 22 foot in a boxing ring, WWF started with 18-foot rings, and about this time they had just switched to the 20s. They switched right about WrestleMania 3. But this 14-foot ring, you can tell the difference, and some of these guys, their timing was not there.
Yeah, I gave this match 2 stars. It was an okay start to the show. It's differences on booking. Some people like to have that first match be hot. Some like to have it as an average match. Then this one, they had it about an average match. Yeah. But I'm going to move on to my 2-finger salute. And this does not go to any matches. This actually goes to the in-between the matches here, because we had to have an interview every match that took at least 5-10 minutes. It really took the flow of the show just completely down. I mean, Ricky Steamboat's interview there was actually pretty bad, and I like Ricky Steamboat. That WrestleMania 3 interview he had was great, but this interview really just made it just go, hee.
Yeah, this is where you could tell the difference between the NWA and the WWF in the promos being somewhat scripted. It used to be just bullet points, or, guys who couldn't talk, they'd have all right, here's 2 or 3 lines to memorize to make sure you add in. There was even points where WWF had what's called the scroll, where they would roll the scroll and you just read the script. You see some of the old Hulk Hogan interviews. You watch his eyes as he's reading the script. Or Macho Man did it a couple of times when he wasn't feeling great. You could watch his eyes as he's reading the script. NWA did not do this. They wanted their stuff to feel organic. And while it's great that they're supposed to do an organic feel, the problem is some of these guys who were not always great talkers or were hit and miss really looked bad.
Right, like some of these guys, they could good interviews. Like Michael P.S. Hayes initially did there. Ric Flair could a good interview there while they were doing that segment. But you don't need it after every match to break down. It just takes away the flow of the show.
And they weren't always to hype up the match that was coming up next. Like the Ricky Steamboat, that was the main event. They didn't need to do it as the first one out. Or there was the time they cut to the Road Warriors. The Road Warriors their match wasn't up yet. So it was even out of order. It kind of threw things off a little bit. Hurt the timing, hurt the flow of the show.
Definitely did.
FTW Premier Promo League. The Promo Performance Alliance. Wrestling Geeks and Pariahs. The Voice of Honor. And Heart and Soul Promotions presents a showcase for everyone. The Champion Showcase, coming in June 2022.
This is post-1987, where the Natural Butch Reed was supposed to win the IC title. This is 2 years after that. Sting was still very green at this time. Butch Reed really did a great job showing that he really was a strong worker. He got a bad reputation for not being great. He was really strong. The problem was he always played the muscle-bound meathead. And when you got the reputation of being a muscle-bound meathead, you're Lex Luger. Can't work worth the damn. Butch Reed could work. And he brought a lot out of Sting that Sting used later in his career. But this match wasn't great. It was too long. Too many pauses because Sting hadn't learned yet how to get the crowd to support him as he's on the underneath, which, kayfabe word of the day, the underneath means you're taking the abuse from the heel. It's supposed to be used to get the crowd to support you. It's called the underneath, kayfabe word of the day. Crowd wasn't all that hot because Sting didn't really know how to work the crowd yet at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I liked the match. I thought it was actually pretty good. I gave it 2.5. I definitely enjoyed it. I thought it was better than the first match. Not by much, but Sting, was rookie here. He was learning to grow. I mean, a couple years later, you would see him in matches with guys like Vader, where he learned how to pop the crowd and play the underneath well.
Yeah, but it was guys like Butch Reed that first started teaching him how to do it, so the journeyman or the carpenter wrestlers are very important in the wrestling business.
Definitely. Moving along to my Quack Attack! This was my favorite match of the whole card here. And believe me, there were some good matches here. But this one, the Midnight Express, Bobby Eaton, Stan Lane, and Jim Cornette taking on the original Midnight Express, Jack Victory, Randy Rose, and Paul Lee Dangerously. For you guys at home, that's Paul Heyman later on. Loser of the match leaves the NWA.
Now to go into a little bit of history here, because I know some of our fans here may not be very familiar with the Midnight Express and the original Midnight Express and all this stuff, so we're going to give you a quick, tiny little history lesson here. The very original Midnight Express was in Southern Championship Wrestling, which was Southern Georgia, Northern Florida, and Alabama. That was Dennis Condrey, Randy Rose, and Norval Austin III. That was the original Midnight Express. Now, when they brought Paul Heyman into feud and brought the original Midnight Express, they did bring Randy Rose and they did bring Dennis Condrey. Dennis Condrey and Bobby Eaton became the Midnight Express that everybody knew in the NWA under Jim Cornette. That had gone away because Dennis Condrey got hurt. They brought in Stan Lane, who was a tag team specialist, part of the Fabulous Ones with Steve Keirn. He also did some teamwork down with Jeff Jarrett. He teamed a little bit with Jeff Jarrett. So he was a tag team specialist as well. And then Dennis Condrey came back, and they started the big feud to give Paul Heyman something to do. And Condrey had left at this point. He was actually out of the NWA, even though they mentioned him by name. And they brought in Jack Victory, who was the flag bearer for the Sheep Herders, when you used to see him as the evil New Zealand Kiwi Sheep Herders, with Jack Victory standing there waving the New Zealand flag.
And I mean, he looked better then than he did in ECW. Good God, Jack Victory, I mean, I get it. 10 years does a lot to a man. It will put on some weight, but he looked in shape here. He looked like he was a polished wrestler. And this is why it gets my quack attack. I'm just going to tell you about that quack attack right there, because this match had Jim Cornette and Paul Heyman. They were actually working in this match, and it looks so good. It's amazing when you can see two managers, not wrestlers, come out there and work the crowd, work the match, sell it up, make it look good, and make you proud to be a professional wrestler or a manager, because them two did that.
Yeah, this match was a really strong match. I gave it 3.5 stars. The first two matches had a lot of slow, dragging Southern style, which there's nothing wrong with the Southern style. It's just you have to add some excitement into the middle of those rest holds, and the first two matches didn't do a great job of that. This one had very few rest holds. There was a lot of great storytelling about these guys genuinely don't like each other. Heyman actually wanting to not tag in was great. Cornette wanting to tag in and taking body slams, punches, clotheslines. The final ending in there, it was great storytelling all the way around. Again, 3.5 stars.
Definitely. I went 3.5 stars on that as well. But now we're going to move on to this match here. The NWA television title. Mike Rotunda with Kevin Sullivan out there taking on Rick Steiner and Scott Steiner.
Yeah, Rick Steiner was the television champion at this point. Arn Anderson had kind of moved away from being the television champion. I think he was in the F as a brainbuster at this time. So they had to start putting another person to represent the television, being on TV all the time. Mike Rotundo filled that bill very, very well. They had a little small feud that Rick Steiner had left the Varsity Club. This match wasn't great. They did what they could, but Rick Steiner was not really a great worker. He stuck way too much to the amateur at this point, which, that's what he was. He was an amateur wrestler. He learned more throughout the years as a tag team worker there with the Steiner brothers, but yeah, at this point, he was stuck in the amateur mode, you could tell. Yeah, and they were really putting over how unintelligent Rick Steiner was. I had forgotten about this, but they used to have a hand puppet called Alex that used to talk to him. And he had his dog Spike that Kevin Sullivan said he had hurt. So Rick Steiner put Mike Rotunda in a sleeper hold and then left his shoulders on the mat to get pinned for the 3 count. Mike Rotundo wins unconscious.
Yeah, and arguably, I know everybody says Arn Anderson was the greatest television champion, but to me, Mike Rotunda looked really good with that title. I thought that he was a great TV champion there.
He was a really good TV champion. He did a great job of telling people that other people could hold it besides Arn Anderson. It is debatable either way. Both were very, very good. I gave this one 2.25.
I went with 3 stars on this, believe it or not, because I actually liked the story of Kevin Sullivan coming out there talking about taking care of his dog, and it distracted him just enough to get Rotunda really the victory here.
Yeah, but he was so distracted he could put on a sleeper hold and then forgot his shoulders were on the mat.
Yes, he did. All right, 2.5. Is that better for you? Because I think I'm going to go with that. That was an idiot move, yes. Moving along here, Lex Luger and Barry Windham for the NWA United States Heavyweight title. Hiro Matsuda, which was all throughout this show, in his corner.
Yeah, Hiro Matsuda. He actually was also out there with Butch Reed.
Yes.
To explain Hiro Matsuda, you're probably wondering where you've heard that name in your past. Well, Hiro Matsuda is the guy that broke Hulk Hogan's leg in training. Yes. So that's where you probably heard his name. He was actually a great wrestler from the 50s and 60s and 70s. Then he came out when the Four Horsemen wasn't there. He kind of took over with the Yamazaki Corporation. He was the head of the Yamazaki Corporation that managed all the heels in the NWA. And this match was decent. I mean, Luger was 3.5 years in the business. I think he started in 85, so he's about 3.5 years in the business at this time. This was a very, very brutal match. I mean, they had Barry Windham punch the corner, and I don't know if he really punched it or if he kayfabed it. He probably kayfabed it. He had cut marks on his hand, so there was blood in his hand. Lex Luger got busted in the eye a couple times. It was decent for a Lex Luger match. I did go 2 3/4 on this one. Barry Windham really did a good job of carrying this match. Luger went over with the Barry Windham forgot to lift his shoulders gimmick.
Again, that same thing. I went 2.5 for that reason because it was not a great way to see the victory happen there. But this was the 80s. They loved to do that spot. If you see it now, you're really kind of disgusted. But the 80s, people actually enjoyed it.
Yeah, we got 2 I forgot to lift my shoulder matches back to back. That really kind of
killed some things there.
It kind of hurts the flow and the feel. I mean, they did 4 straight title matches, but after that second, you were like, man, they better have something better next time. And my God, they did.
Oh, yeah, next match here. You had the Road Warriors hawking animal with Paul Ellery there, taking on the Varsity Club, Kevin Sullivan, and Dr. Death, Steve Williams.
Yeah, Kevin Sullivan was the head of the Varsity Club, which the first member was Mike Rotundo, who was a wrestler from Syracuse. Then Dr. Death came in. Then Rick Steiner came in. Then they tried to bring Sting in, and that's where it kind of all fell apart. They did explain that Kevin Sullivan was a high school wrestler, a 4-time state champion in Massachusetts, so he was an accomplished wrestler in his own right. This match, while it was really exciting, it was really, really, really sloppy. Now, the Road Warriors were known to be a little sloppy, and it added to their mystique and added to their credibility, but the timing was sloppy in this, so it didn't look clean. I did go 2 3/4 because this was a great pickup match. It got people excited for what was coming up for the main event, but oofed.
Yeah, I mean, I went 3 stars. I love the finish of it. You know, the Pure 6 brawl in the ring. Of course, we're both tag teams when they're fighting. Road Warrior Hawk with that clothesline off the top, nailing Kevin Sullivan. That was awesome. Yeah. I mean, the match had its chemistry there, and it looked good because the Road Warriors came out as dominant as they did in the 80s like they did in this match.
That's true. That is true. They definitely put over that it was Chicago, and that's where the Road Warriors build to be from, is Chicago, even though we know they're actually from Minnesota.
Yes, they are. And moving on to the main event. And this was a main event that did not disappoint. This was the only one with a montage, actually going about 7 minutes. And it was enjoyable to recap that. For people who watched it now, 30-some-odd years later?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that was a good recap and a good memory refresh for me. Ricky the Dragon Steamboat taking on Ric Flair with Hiro Masuda in the corner for the NWA World Heavyweight title. The 10 pounds of gold.
Well, no, the 10 pounds of gold.
I'm sorry, the big gold belt.
The big gold belt. There you go.
Let's put that right.
Now, this match has a lot of historical significance in here. This is often seen as Ric Flair's greatest time being the world champion, is this match and the next match they have a month later and then 2 months after that when the title changes. Yes, that means this is where Ricky Steamboat won his world title. February 23rd, 1989, with a small package. This match had lots of action, incredible storytelling, a lot of back and forth action. They never once took a break. They were rolling around. They were doing everything. Matsuda was used judiciously. The ref bump was done properly. 4 stars. This match was great.
Yeah, I agree with that. 4 stars is what I gave this as well. This was definitely a strong match. One of Ricky Steamboat's most memorable matches. Definitely him and Macho Man right there even, I believe. But this was the culminating moment here. This is where he got his world
Right,
title.
and then this led to their next month in March where they had the 57-minute match.
Yeah.
That was basically it's considered an Iron Man match, although it wasn't. That led to May when Ric Flair won the title back. That they had like 4 matches total, but it's seen as some of the best matches in wrestling history in 1989.
And he defended us more times than Ronnie Garvin did when he was world champ.
Yep, Ronnie Garvin got 1 title defense, and he lost it in that 1 title defense.
That does happen every now and then. But there we go, folks. There is the Chi-Town Rumble 1989. You ready to see what we're going to do next?
That was a nice breath of fresh air because you've tortured me for a while. Thank you for giving me something good here. I hope you're not just setting me up for failure.
No, I think we're going to give you something really good here. I want you to take a look right here.
Folks, pray.
Oh, see?
This is hit and miss, but more hits than misses.
I'm telling you. We're going to be covering
the
Clash of Champions here. We're going to cover some certain episodes that we wanted to uncover here, so make sure you tune in for that. I'm Dr. Quack.
And I'm the important one, Mr. Mayhem, saying, you know what? The spray didn't need to come out today.
It did not. See you next time.